The land had dried to bone. Dust curled off the prairie like breath off a sleeping mouth, and the wind carried it westward, where the ridgelines broke sky into ribbons. No rain had come in months. Cattle wandered gaunt among brittle sage, ribs pressing against hide, their eyes dulled to the world. It was a season of watching things vanish, water from the creek, the light in a man's gaze, the strength in a mother's spine. She rode at dusk. No name given, none asked. Just a woman, long-backed in the saddle, one boot dragging a stirrup too worn to hold tight, the other pressed firm. She rode with her daughter balanced before her, the girl's arms thin around the woman's waist. Dust caked them both. In the fading light they looked hewn from the same sorrow. The girl didn't speak, not since the fire. The woman's name, though she had little use for it anymore, was Mercy Clay. A name that once might have been given in jest or hope. She'd been Mercy to a drunkard husband, to a brother gone feral in the woods, to strangers on the trail who mistook her silence for softness. Now she was mostly ghost, moving through towns, sleeping in barns, asking nothing. They came upon the ranch after 7 days riding dry. No sign but a cedar post fence and a barn slumping into goldgrass. The house behind it was plain and square, wind-battered, not new, not ruined. Smoke rose from the chimney, not much. Enough to say, someone lives. She dismounted. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself with a hand against the mare's flank. The girl slid off with practiced care. 9 years old, but already she moved like a child who expected to fall. Mercy took a corner of her skirt and wiped at the girl's face, brushing away the long trail of road dust clinging beneath her eyes like soot. She said nothing. The girl blinked up, eyes rimmed red, lashes crusted. The wiping wasn't just for dirt. It was for the memory, too, the ash, the screams, the way the sun turned orange that night. It was all still behind her eyes, Mercy knew. The child was half-mute from grief and smoke, and Mercy couldn't take it from her. They stood that way until the door opened. A man stepped out. Not young, not old. His boots were cracked, his shirt sun-bleached and patched at the shoulder. A face grown lined from quiet years, but not unkind. He didn't reach for a rifle, didn't call out, just took them in like a man watching storm clouds stack along the ridge. Mercy straightened. He looked once at her, once at the child, then back again. "You look rode near dead," he said. Mercy kept her jaw tight. "We won't stay," she said, "just need water." The man nodded once, turned without asking more. Left the door open behind him. Inside was cool and plain, wood stove still warm, a jug of well water on the table beside 2 tin cups. He poured and offered them. The girl drank first, then the mother. The man didn't speak until the girl had leaned against the woman's side, small body sagging like a sapling bent to shelter. He folded his hands slow, as though the act mattered. "Stay as long as you need," he said. Mercy looked at him sharp, unsure. He didn't smile, he just meant it. She sat straighter then, not in trust, not yet, but in recognition. There was something quiet in him that she understood, a loneliness that didn't reach out, didn't plead. Just made room. That night they slept in the loft above the barn. He brought them blankets, left without waiting for thanks. The wind came up hard near midnight. Mercy lay with her daughter's back pressed against her chest, feeling the girl's breath, shallow but steady. She could smell hay, manure, the old sweat of the horse below. She kept her eyes open long past sleep, watching moonlight carve through the gaps in the boards. Outside, coyotes called. In the distance, something new was beginning, though she couldn't yet name it. Morning came low and gray, the kind of light that makes everything seem hushed. Mercy rose before the girl stirred, easing herself from beneath the blanket without waking her. Her back ached, hips stiff from years of hard ground and harder choices. She crossed the loft barefoot, stepping carefully on the rough boards. When she opened the hatch and climbed down, the barn smelled of warm hay and old leather. The man was already outside, mending fence. He worked slow, not for lack of strength, but with the practiced deliberation of someone who'd spent too many years with no one watching. His movements had a rhythm to them: drive the nail, test the line, move on. Mercy stood in the barn's shadow and watched for a while. Eventually he straightened, caught her eyes across the yard, gave a nod. "Coffee, on," he said. Then turned back to the post. Inside the house, the stove had been lit again. A battered kettle sat on top, steam curling from the spout. A tin plate held half a loaf of cornbread. She stared at it longer than she meant to. Hunger had stopped being sharp a while ago, now it just sat in her gut like coals. She took one piece for herself, carried the rest out to the girl, who'd woken and was sitting cross-legged in the loft, blinking through strands of her tangled hair. Mercy smoothed the back of her head, the way a mother might steady herself. The girl didn't speak, but she took the food and ate. Later that day, the man came with tools. "Barn roof needs patchin'," he said. "Storm season's not far off." He didn't ask her to help, just set the tools down and looked at her, waiting. Mercy said nothing, but she followed. They worked without speech for hours, hammering shingles back into place, relaying boards where rain had broken through. The wind tugged at their sleeves, flung grit into their eyes. Twice she had to stop and rub the sting away. The man said nothing of it, just kept working. By late afternoon, the girl had climbed into the hayloft again. She wasn't playing, just watching. One hand gripped a bit of twine she'd knotted into a kind of doll, the only toy she'd carried out of the fire. At supper, they ate together for the first time. Mercy sat across from the man, the girl pressed beside her. The food was simple beans, fried potatoes, a heel of bacon, but it filled the quiet with something solid. The man bowed his head before the first bite. Didn't pray aloud, just a moment of stillness. That night, Mercy lingered by the stove. The man was mending a bridle, long fingers threading leather through the loop with slow precision. "Your wife?" she asked, voice soft. He paused, looked up, shook his head. "Gone near 5 years now, fever took her." She nodded once, then stood. No more words passed. The next days came on like slow rain, no hurry, but each moment heavier than the last. Mercy began to wash things. The girl's dress, her own apron, the cloths from the kitchen drawer. She scrubbed with a rough bar of soap until her knuckles split. The man didn't stop her, didn't thank her either, just let it happen. He took to leaving tools by the barn each morning, sickle, hoe, sometimes a pair of worn gloves. She used them all. Weeds were cleared. A coop swept. She tended to chores like a woman used to the rhythm of others' needs. The girl began sleeping through the night. She no longer clung so tightly at dusk. One morning, Mercy woke to find her outside, crouched near the henhouse, hand outstretched toward a limping bird. She wasn't speaking yet, but the silence was changing, less brittle, less like absence. One afternoon, a rider came, young man, brown coat, restless eyes. He didn't dismount. Just asked if the man had seen anyone come through, a woman and child, maybe alone, the kind of folks who leave fast and don't want looking after. The man stood with one hand on the fence rail, gaze steady. "Haven't seen any such," he said. The rider squinted, seemed ready to argue. Then something in the man's posture stopped him. He tipped his hat and turned back toward the horizon, hooves raising dust that hung in the air long after he'd gone. That evening, as the sun split behind a bank of clouds, Mercy stood at the well drawing water. The girl sat on the porch, legs swinging. The man leaned against the post beside her, not touching, just near enough to be known. She caught his eye across the yard. He didn't speak, just nodded once. She returned the nod, not thanks, not yet, but recognition. In this place where words had failed them, it was enough. The days turned softer. Not easier, work remained hard, and the wind never ceased its low complaints, but something beneath the grind had shifted. Mercy began to walk with less of that drawn-in look, the one born from too many nights listening for footfalls in the dark. She still flinched at sudden sounds, still kept the girl within arm's reach when strangers rode the road's edge. But her eyes lingered longer on the horizon now, and once or twice she almost smiled. The man's name, she learned one morning as they mended a gate together, was Eli. He said it plain, between hammer strikes, like a man offering water. Then he moved on, as if nothing more need be shared. She didn't offer hers in return. But he knew it by the second week. She heard him say it to the mare one day, gently, as he rubbed the horse's neck. "You carry her well, Mercy." The horse blinked, slow and patient. She didn't correct him. There was no need. The girl spoke her first word that third week. It came like a dropped stone in a still pond. They were in the garden, what little grew, pulling dead stalks from a crooked row. Mercy had turned to answer Eli's call from the porch when the girl tugged her sleeve. "Mama." Just that, a breath, a whisper, but it landed in Mercy's chest like a blow. She dropped to her knees and pulled the girl close. Didn't cry, not then. But later in the barn, she sat alone for an hour, her hands clenched into fists, knuckles white, as if bracing against something enormous breaking loose inside. Eli didn't speak of it. But the next day he brought home a handful of wildflowers, yellow and sharp-scented, left them on the table without comment. The girls stared at them a long while before reaching out. By the fourth week, Mercy began sleeping in the house. The loft was growing colder with the turn toward autumn, and Eli had cleared out a small room near the back, dusty, but with a cot and quilt. He stood awkward at the threshold as she stepped inside with her bundle of clothes. "You and the girl take this. It's warmer, door latches." She looked at him not with suspicion but with a kind of careful understanding. "You been kind," she said. He just shook his head. "Ain't kindness just right?" She nodded. That night with the girl curled into her side, Mercy slept a sleep so deep she did not dream, not of fire, not of running, not of the man whose fists taught silence. In the morning there was frost on the porch rail. Eli began mending the chimney. Mercy chopped wood beside the house, arms steady, breath forming small clouds. The girl sat nearby, wrapping twine around smooth stones, making small gifts only a child would understand. One afternoon, as Mercy worked in the kitchen, she saw the girl slip out the door alone. Her stomach knotted, but she didn't follow. Not yet. She stood at the window and watched. The girl walked toward the edge of the field where the pines began. She knelt beside something, Mercy couldn't see what, and stayed there, still as stone. Then, just as slowly, she rose, turned, and walked back, her face unreadable but calm. Later, when Mercy asked softly what she'd seen, the girl only shrugged. But she slept easier that night, her hands no longer clenching the blanket in her sleep. Then came the storm. It rolled over the ridgeline without warning, dark and roiling, thunder like distant cannons. The first strike of lightning hit close, so close the ground trembled. Eli shouted for the horses. Mercy grabbed the girl and ran for the barn. They worked fast, soaked through in minutes. The sky split again and again with light, the world strobing white and black. Mercy held the girl tight, crouched in the straw as wind screamed through the slats. Eli came in last, boots dragging mud. He knelt beside them, close enough to touch but not reaching. They waited together as the storm passed, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat. When it was done, and the thunder had faded into the hills, he spoke. "You don't have to keep running." Mercy said nothing. She looked at him a long time, then down at the girl who'd fallen asleep in her lap. Outside, rain began to ease. The first stars blinked back into the world. She didn't answer. But she didn't leave. The world turned gold. October crept into the valley with soft footsteps, touching every leaf with flame before carrying them away on the wind. The sky deepened. Days shortened. That particular stillness of pre-winter settled in, where every sound feels farther, and every breath more visible. Mercy took to rising early. Before the sun, before Eli stirred, she'd build the fire and set coffee to boil. The kitchen was hers now, not by claim, but by ritual. She swept the corners, scrubbed the table, kept the cupboards neat. It was not the labor of obligation, but of return, like setting bones back into place after a long dislocation. The girl began to speak more, though only to her mother. At first it was barely audible. Names of birds, colors, then questions slow and halting. "Why are clouds shaped like that? Do horses dream?" Mercy answered best she could. Sometimes she simply held the child close and let silence do the rest. Eli watched all this with a kind of reverent distance. He never imposed, never intruded. When the girl addressed him, which came only after weeks of watching him from doorways and behind Mercy's skirt, it was with the shy precision of a child testing her voice. "Can I feed the hens?" Eli nodded. They'd be glad of it. He handed her the pail without flourish. No praise, no coaxing, just trust placed plainly in her small hands. By mid-month, the girl was walking the fence-a-line with the dog. She'd named him Bramble, though he likely had a dozen names in his years. A wiry shepherd mix with eyes like old wood. He followed her everywhere now, and when she stumbled or froze at some sharp noise, he circled close until she steadied. One night Mercy found herself humming while folding linen. It caught her off guard, that sound in her throat, a lullaby once sung to a baby in a better house. She stopped mid-note and stood still, hands trembling over a towel. Eli was nearby, fixing a loose chair leg. He looked up but didn't comment, just kept working, the soft scrape of wood on wood a kind of reassurance. That same night, as they shared stew around the stove, Eli asked the girl if she liked stories. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I used to read aloud," he said. "Not much good at it, voice too slow, but it passes time." He brought a thin book from a shelf worn to slope, sat on the floor beside the hearth, and read about a bear who kept secrets under his coat. The girl listened without blinking, her cheek against Mercy's thigh. When he finished, she asked, almost inaudibly, if the bear ever told. Eli smiled faintly. Maybe, when he had someone who'd listen. The first snow came the next morning. A light fall, just enough to hush the world, to dust the fence posts and cover the fields in clean white. The girl ran outside at first light, bareheaded, laughing without sound. Her joy came through her limbs, through the bright shock of her steps. Mercy stood at the doorway, arms crossed against the cold, and watched. That afternoon, while the girl napped curled in a quilt, Mercy sat across from Eli in the kitchen. The window showed a sky the color of pewter, smoke from the chimney blew straight west. "I dreamed about him," she said quietly. Eli didn't look up from the knife he was sharpening. "He found us," she said, "but I wasn't afraid this time." Still he didn't speak, just paused the blade's rhythm. "I buried the old dress," she added, "the one from before. In the field, near the stump." He nodded once slow. "You did right," he said. That evening, as the cold deepened, the girl placed her doll, still made of twine and a stone, on the mantel. "Her name's Junia," she said aloud. Neither adult asked where the name came from, but they each repeated it later, softly, as if it might bind something broken. Junia slept between them that night, as the wind howled through the chimney and stars wheeled silently overhead. Winter thickened, not harsh, not yet, but steady in its claim. Snow gathered in the folds of the land like secrets laid down gently, layer by layer. The fields disappeared beneath white, the trails turned faint. What had once been known paths were now just quiet expanses leading nowhere and everywhere at once. The rhythms changed with the weather. Mornings became slower. Water froze in the pump handle, and Mercy took to lighting the stove before first light just to warm the floorboards. The girl rose without protest now, helping with the kindling, her fingers chapped and nimble. She moved with the confidence of routine, not needing to be told. One evening, Eli brought in an old fiddle from the barn. It had belonged to his father, he said, hadn't been tuned in a decade. The strings were rusted, bow hair slack with time. He sat by the fire and worked it slowly back into voice. The first few notes screeched, thin and broken. But he kept at it. By the fourth night, he found a melody. The girl watched with open awe. She sat cross-legged at his feet, twined doll in her lap, and tilted her head with each note as if trying to trace its shape through the air. Mercy didn't say a word, but her hands stilled in the basket of mending. Her breathing changed. That song, slow, mournful, familiar and not, rose up like smoke and hung in the rafters long after the bow fell still. Days shortened further. They hung dried herbs from the rafters, smoked meat, stored root vegetables in the cellar. Eli taught Mercy how to snare rabbits near the creek, now frozen at the edges. She, never hunted before, always left that part to men. But she listened, learned, and brought back her first catch one clear morning with blood drying at her sleeve and something new in her eyes. That night, they ate quietly. The girl told them a story over supper. It was simple, about a wolf and a hill and a fire that wouldn't die. But she told it with her hands, with her eyes, with long pauses that meant more than the words. Eli nodded when she finished. Mercy reached out and brushed the girl's hair back without speaking. Later, as snow fell again, heavier this time, Mercy sat at the window with the shutters open a crack. "I used to think love had to come fast," she said, loud. "All fire and reckoning." Eli sat across from her near the stove, boots drying beside him. "I don't think that now," she added. He didn't answer. But he leaned back and looked at her fully for the first time in days, not with question, not with pity, but with that rare thing. Acknowledgement without demand. The next morning a bird flew into the window, not hard enough to die, just dazed. It flapped once, then lay stunned in the snow. The girl found it, brought it in cupped in her hands, shivering and wide-eyed. Mercy gathered cloth to wrap it. Eli fetched a box and some seeds. They made a place near the stove. The bird blinked slowly, yellow-eyed and fierce despite its weakness. "It's a kestrel," Eli said. "Fierce kind, that one." The girl didn't reply, but she stayed beside the box all day. When the bird finally stood on its feet again, wobbly, sharp-beaked, wary, she grinned so wide her eyes crinkled. It was her first smile since the fire. Mercy saw it and turned away fast, covering her mouth. She stepped outside into the brittle cold and stood beneath a sky the color of smoke. The wind was rising again, carrying whispers through the dry pine tops. She thought, for the first time in months, that maybe they would stay through spring, that maybe this place wasn't a stop between wounds, but something else. Something that grew roots slowly, through snow and silence and the careful turning of heads toward one another. Inside, the girl was laughing. The kestrel fluttered against the glass. The thaw came quietly. One morning, the snow no longer crunched beneath their boots. It gave soft and wet, whispering its surrender. The creek began to move again, first in trickles, then in slow, patient gurgles. Sap rose in the maples. Birds returned in pairs. The land, long silent beneath white, began to exhale. Mercy rose early still, but now left the door open as she swept, letting the warming air drift in. The girl helped plant the first early seeds: lettuce, peas, radish. Her fingers had grown sure, her knees brown with soil by noon. She'd taken to singing under her breath, tuneless, half-murmured things, but Mercy never interrupted. Each note was sacred. Eli worked the pasture with the mule, breaking the ground where frost still lingered beneath. Mercy watched him sometimes from the porch, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, the girl's head resting against her side. There was something steady in the shape of that man, his way of walking the fence line without pause, his quiet repairs, his refusal to speak of loss as if it were owed attention. One day, he built a swing from an old tire and some rope. He didn't say it was for the girl, but she knew. She watched him from behind the barn, then ran to it once he'd gone, launching herself in clumsy arcs through the warming air. That night, Mercy cooked supper from scratch. Biscuits, boiled potatoes, rabbit stew thick with herbs. She'd found wild onions that morning near the creek and added them with careful hands. Eli said nothing as they ate, but afterward he stood, took the kettle from the hook, and refilled her cup before his own. The gesture was small, but Mercy's eyes went to his and they held there. It had been months since the fire, longer since she'd spoken the truth aloud, so she did. He hurt us. She said it plain, not looking for comfort. Not even looking at him when she said it. The girl across the table grew still. Mercy reached for her hand. But he's gone now. The fire took more than it gave, but it took him too. Eli didn't respond right away. Just leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands folded. Fire can do that, he said. End things clean, even if it don't ask. The girl squeezed Mercy's fingers. I didn't know where else to go, Mercy said. You came here, he replied. That was enough. They sat there until the lamp guttered low, until the fire died to embers, until the girl fell asleep across Mercy's lap. The next morning, Mercy went to the barn alone. She saddled the mare, tied her bedroll behind the saddle. Eli stood by the fence, watching without question. Mercy led the horse out and stood a long moment in the quiet. I have to ride, she said. He nodded slow. I know. I need to see the place again. The bones of it. You'll come back. It wasn't a question, just a line drawn gentle in the dirt. Mercy looked at him then. For the first time, really looked, at the lines around his mouth, the way his eyes held hers without flinching, at the steadiness in his body that had become a place she could lean. I will, she said. She rode out just past dawn. The girl stayed. She'd chosen to, with Eli, with Junia, with the kestrel who'd returned to the field but came back to the porch rail most evenings, tilting its head as if it, too, was waiting. Mercy returned 2 days later. Her boots were caked in ash, her eyes bloodshot. She said nothing about what she'd seen, just walked into the kitchen, found the girl brushing crumbs from the table, and knelt beside her. She wiped the dust from her daughter's eyes, and said nothing, until Eli stepped in from the yard, set his hat on the hook, and spoke, soft and certain, stay as long as you need. And this time, Mercy stayed.